Hey, welcome, folks. It's Lance here. Tonight I'm going to show you how to do document development in the 21st century using AI. And the way I describe it is technical writers used to work at the sentence and the paragraph level. We'd create work at, whatever pace we could type. We'd finish documents, and then we'd go into a review process, and we'd get review comments back. And then we'd go into the documents and we'd make the changes and go through the review process. And sometimes it was several times. And we do that. Now it would take time. Tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to use AI as both the writer and the reviewer. And we're going to work at the document level. So instead of having a reviewer come back and say, you need to change paragraphs 5, 7, and 9, we'll let the reviewer come back with all these recommendations, and then we'll go back over to our writer, which is going to be ChatGPT tonight, and let ChatGPT incorporate all the comments and just produce a new version of the document. So we're going to kind of work at the document level rather than the content level. And you're going to see that that's going to speed up productivity quite a bit. Let's switch over here to the Explorer real quick. Now, what I'm going to do tonight is I'm gonna do some work based upon what's called the PVPP framework, or the Productive Value Productive Power framework. This is a mathematical framework that models human behavior. And what we found after working on this for a while, it sheds a fair amount of insight into mental health. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details about how that does that. There's going to be another video or two that will do that. But for tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to try to build off a document that I created a while ago. The name of the document was Research Paper PVPP Disorder Structural Mapping. And let's take and open that up. And I'll show you what it is. Um, in the area of mental health, there's a number of afflictions. There's depression, there's bipolar, there's um, schizophrenia. There's any number of afflictions that occur. And if you go out and you look at the DSM-5 categories for these things, you'll see that they're different type dominant. Like general anxiety disorder is type 1 dominant, schizophrenia is type 2 dominant, etc. Well, in our model, in the PVP model, we can isolate things into two different layers. Not necessarily three or four, but two different layers. Something we call layer one, which is like a substrate level, that would probably correspond to the neurological aspect of the human body, the chemicals in the brain, etc., and the neural networks and things like that. But then layer two and above is basically what I would say is the memory model, the cognitive model, what you experience in your life, all of the interactions, all of the history, all of the problems you've run into, all of the good things you've run into, etc. And what we have found doing some primitive modeling before with this stuff is that there's a correlation between the medically observed symptoms in the industry and what our model predicts as to where these symptoms might show up in the lower level or the higher level, and subsequently how a treatment might be administered. A good example would be depression is can be at both levels, at the neurological level. I use that term lightly, but at the chemical brain level, and also at the cognitive level. And there's treatments for both. There's medicine for the lower level, and there's talk therapy for the above level, among a few other things. But we're gonna focus tonight on things like talk therapy. One of the things we just recently wrote is a paper on cognitive behavioral therapy, how CBT works based upon the model, and the model describes how CBT works in the real world. Okay, and that will be going out for publishing soon. Now, I'm not going to go into that tonight either, but what I'm going to go into is I'm going to try to build a paper, and that's what this is about. I don't want to talk anymore about the models. I just want to build a paper for you and show you how AI works to accelerate the revision review process for building papers. Okay, so let's just skip to that right now. If you want more information on the PV model framework, you can look at one of my other videos. So tonight, let's take this document. And it's a rough draft. It's called Structural Reclassification of Major Psychiatric Disorders Within the PVP Framework, a Layered Instability Model. And this was written a while ago. It was generated. It's a very rough draft. It was early on when the model was just getting be defined. And it was an attempt at, like I said before, mapping the model outputs to the actual DSM categories that show up in the medical industry. So we're gonna modify this tonight. So I'm gonna close this out. Let me switch over to Explorer real quick. I'm gonna close out this draft because we're not gonna look at that anymore. Do not save. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come over to Explorer and we're going to find that draft. And here it is. And I'm just going to copy it to the clipboard. And then we're going to go over to ChatGPT, who is our author. And I'm going to paste that document in here. And then I'm going to give ChatGPT some instructions. Now, I'm not going to type. I use a program called WhisperFlow, which I advise anyone to get your hands on this. It allows you to talk into any entry field in any application on the desktop, on the computer desktop. So instead of typing, you can just talk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk and give ChatGPT instructions on what I want to do with this paper. I'm attaching an early version of a paper that was written on disorder mapping to the DSM categories. This was written quite a while ago. The goal tonight would be to see if we can take this paper as a base and come up with a real accurate mapping that actually shows strong correlation between our model and the medical industry. When we originally looked at this, we saw a high percentage of correlation. I remember it was about 85%. You might be able to tell me better. Why don't you take and read this paper and tell me if you remember it, and tell me where you think we can go in terms of getting a paper to publish in a journal. Now we've done the CBT paper, we've done the addiction paper. What I'd like to do now is yet a third paper along this category and see if we can get yet a third submission out there where we can get some exposure into the medical community. Okay, that's my instructions to you, ChatGPT. Let me know if you have any questions, and let me know how you want to proceed. So that WhisperFlow is hotkey generated. I just hold a hotkey down and I talk, and then it records all that I wrote. So now I'm just going to hit submit to ChatGPT and see what it has to say about whether we can do a paper here or not. Remember, the goal tonight is just to show you the writing review process and how it speeds up document creation. The goal is not to get into anything specific about PVP model. So generally AI runs pretty quick. Right now it looks like it's looking out at some magazines, some research journals, and it's going to come back with some insights into whether we can do something useful here or not. The way I interact with AI is just like I'm talking to another co-researcher in the room. Um, I imagine myself in the room, only I have a PhD in every category and I have the Encyclopedia Britannica in my head. That's basically how I work with AI. And we'll have conversations back and forth, um, where I talk up to 10 minutes and give it complex instructions, ask complex questions. We interact back and forth, and we basically co-research. So let's see what it came back with here. It said, okay, I remember it. I'll let you read. I'm not gonna read all of this, but I'm gonna read some of it. Yes, I remember it. The old mapping draft classified disorders into three instability types: one, regulatory miscalibration; two, substrate instability; and type three, coupled instability. And then maps major DSM categories onto those types before comparing them to dominant treatment modalities. My blunt read: this draft is not submission based yet, but is a salvage base for a third paper. So ChatGPT thinks we have something to work with, and that's what we're going to go forward here. Now I'm going to show you the write and review process, and this is where hopefully you'll get some insight into how to accelerate your development. So let's see where it stands now, what it already does well, what is weak, what I think a publishable third paper should be. Do not publish this as PVP maps DSM better than psychiatry does. No, we don't want to do that. PVPP reclassifies psychiatric disorders. We don't do that either. No one will read it. Best paper concept: a structured instability taxonomy for psychiatric disorders with treatment modality coherence as a bounded external check. That's a fancy way of saying we're going to produce some answers and we're going to see if the answers coincide with what the industry expects the answers to be. My recommendation: go to where here. Would not jump straight into the full paper rewrite tonight. The right next move is to construct an intermediate document. Now this is where ChatGPT says we're gonna construct an intermediate document, and it's gonna, with my help, work through some of the questions about what might go into the paper in a document form, and it's gonna write it all out as an intermediate document. So here it says its job would be to answer 4 questions before we draft. What is the actual contribution claim now? What is the paper's unit of analysis? How much of the old type 1, type 2, type 3 taxonomy survives? And what would make the treatment alignment claim honest instead of hand wavy? Okay, let's see. Where I think this should go as a publishable third paper. Route A, better and safer, a conceptual theoretical paper on structural psychiatric phenotypes. Route B, more aggressive and riskier, a disorder mapping paper with treatment modality coherence. I think that's what we originally produced. But let's see where it recommends we ought to go here. What journal it's recommending. I would lean Theory and Philosophy of Psychiatry and Theoretical Psychology. PPP, here's a journal that I'm submitting an article to already. So here's some journal articles it's going to propose. My current ranking for this third P would be PPP, Theory and Psychology. Okay, that's just where it says it wants to go. But our answer is yes, I remember this paper. I would not publish the draft as is, etc., etc. Okay, so the next move, it says, is to build. So the smart move is to rebuild it on a more honest footing. If you want, I'll draft that memo next. I believe it is referring to this document here that it says it wants to create for its intermediate work. Right here, PVP decision framework. So we're going to let it go. I'm going to say basically proceed. And we're going to let it build a document it sees as an intermediate piece of work to help us get to the end game of a brand new article. Now, this can take anywhere from, 30 seconds to 10 minutes at this phase. Um, and sometimes you run into some bugs in ChatGPT user interface, just the application, not bugs in the AI, but bugs in the application interface where it will time out or get a network timeout, network disconnection, things like that. There's some bugs in the UI, but it's nothing we can't get around. Sometimes you have to resubmit the question a second time or the action. Now I want you to note what my action was. I told ChatGPT to proceed. That's it. Basically proceed and write an intermediate document based upon the instructions I gave it earlier in a draft document that we gave it. Now that's not a lot of input on my part, is it? I mean, that's not a lot. So it's basically doing the work here. What I'll do is I'll fast forward through this in the actual video so that we can get to the meat of the iterations. Okay, there, we've built a file. It said it built the internal memo, and it's going to be called PP Decision Framework Psychiatric Structural Mapping Argument Memo version 01, category research papers. And we're going to download that right now. And I'm going to download it into a temporary folder. And we're going to go take a look at that. So here, it just created it right here. Let's open it up and see what it looks like. Okay, here's our document. How long is it? It's only 4 pages long. Again, it's an internal, kind of a ChatGPT intermediate document. So it comes down a little bit of psychiatric structural mapping, argument memo, purpose, bottom line judgment, best paper route, what the old paper gets right, why the draft is not submission. It's basically some intermediate work. What the paper must not say, what journal, kind of what we went through before, final judgment. Okay, well, let's go back to ChatGPT and see what it recommends we do next. Next thing it says is, if you want, the next step is a full rewrite of the draft. So I believe it wants to go back to the original paper I gave it, and it wants to draft a new version 1 of it, condensed paper draft, psychiatric phenotypes and treatment modality coherence. So once more, I'm going to say proceed. It's going to take that original draft, it's going to combine it with its intermediate working file that it just created, and it's going to create a second draft. This might take a little longer because it's doing a little more work in the background. So again, I'll fast forward through it so that we can get to the next interesting step. The next interesting step is where we're going to take this document and we're going to feed it into another AI and get some review. So I'm going to open it up. I'm going to take a look at it. And if I think it's okay, I'm going to give it over to, in this case, we're going to use Claude. And I'm going to ask Claude to do a review of it. Claude will provide that review, and then we'll take that review back to ChatGPT and say, hey, Chat, Claude has these comments. Could you incorporate these comments and produce yet another draft? And we're going to iterate on this process until we have a document that is ready for submission or, close to submission. Okay, that took a while. It took about 5 minutes. But what it did do is it produced the next draft of this doc. So we're going to download it. I'm going to put it in our temporary folder. And we're going to go take a look at it. Okay, so this is the first draft. Well, it's the first new draft. It's a 6-page paper. Here's the table of contents: introduction, scope, claim and discipline, minimal architecture, etc., 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 conclusion. And we have a paper. It shows the shows the mapping of the various PVPPP layers here. Show you how complicated it is. Here it has a list of disorder, family, prototypical presentation, schizophrenia, bipolar, ADHD. Notice that it went out. Now, I didn't give it a list of this, did I? I told it to go figure this out. So it went out to the internet and got all of these mental illnesses and brought them back and categorized them in 3 categories. Conclusion: the old disorder mapping draft contained one durable idea: psychiatry already acts as if its instability focus matters, etc., etc. Okay, well, what's interesting now is, so now basically we've gone through one iteration of take an old draft and produce a new draft with it. Now we're going to feed that into Claude, and we're going to see how that works in terms of, we're going to ask it to review it. So let's go back to ChatGPT. Now, we're not going to just ask Claude to review it willy-nilly. We're going to ask Claude to do a specific technical review. And I'm going to ask ChatGPT to write a prompt for me so that Claude has specific instructions on how to review this. So again, I'm going to use my WhisperFlow app, and I'm going to talk in the entry field here. Okay, I want to take this draft and I want to feed it to Claude for a review. Can you write me a prompt for a technical review? We know how AI can be real flattering when it comes to stuff like this. We don't want that. We want a hard review. We want a technical review. So write me a prompt to give to Claude, and I will take this draft and I'll feed it into Claude, and we'll get what comments Claude has, and then I'll bring them back here and give them to you, ChatGPT. Okay, so I told it to build me a prompt, basically. We already have the draft. Now we just need the prompt to go with it. And then we'll jump over to Claude and we'll put both in, and we'll get a review. Here it says, I'm writing a draft of a theoretical paper in Word format. I do not want encouragement or a friendly read. I want hard, technical, publication-oriented review. So it's writing a big prompt here. Your job is to determine whether this paper actually supports its claim, whether it's still too coarse, too circular, too framework dependent, or too close to hand waving. What I want from you, that's Claude. Bottom line verdict: strongest actual contributions, most serious weaknesses, circularity test, relabeling test. If a skeptical psychiatrist or psychologist said this is just a repackaging of common clinical distinctions in private framework language, how strong is that objection? This is the kind of things that you run into in the real world when you submit a paper. Is you'll get someone come back and says this is just another language. You didn't do anything new here. You just repackaged something old. And we're going to try to avoid that. We're going to find out. We don't really fully know yet whether that's what this is. but we're going to hopefully go through this process to find out. In the end, we hope we're going to have something very, very novel that will predict or answer questions that, don't have answers yet today. So it's still writing this prompt. This is a long, long prompt. Okay, here finally. So it's finished. So what we're going to do, I'm going to copy this prompt to the clipboard. Here it is here. Then I want to jump over to Claude. Let's see where Claude is. I have to find Claude. Then I'm going to say, here's the prompt, Claude. Then I'm going to give it the document. I'm going to drag that in. So now Claude has the document. Claude has the instructions on how to review it. I'm going to hit enter and let Claude go do its thing. This shouldn't take too long. So I will just leave it up here. I doubt that I'll need to fast forward through this. Here, it's already back. Here's a full review. Okay. Bottom line verdict. Reject, but interesting. So the first thing it says is, no, this paper isn't going to go anywhere, but there's something interesting in it, so who knows? So let's keep going here. Strongest actual contribution. The explicit layer 1, layer 2 framing of implicit psychiatric practice. That's PVPD stuff. Layer 1, layer 2 that I talked about earlier. Prototypical presentation of unit analysis. Honest statement of the paper's limits. Most serious weakness. The structuring mapping table is pure assertion. Ah, that's interesting. Yeah, I suspect it is. So let's keep going. So as you can see, it's not very nice. Claude doesn't make nice with the authors. It's pretty hard on them. Circularity test. Is the structural phenotype defined independently of treatment conventions? Formally, yes. Relabeling test. Strength of relabeling objections. That's going to be the interesting one here, is if we just taken something and we relabeled everything. Architecture test. Is the paper really using the stronger post-CBT, post-addictive? Oh, that's okay. That's a question related to articles that we wrote earlier. So Claude already knows a little bit about the model. And it says no, the stronger architecture is not being used. So that's okay. We're just going to keep going here. Formalism test. Novelty and significance. Journal fit test. And it's still going. Smallest revision set that would most improve it. Here's where it gets interesting. It's telling, what should we do? Priority 1, derive at least 3 of the 9 structural assignments from the criteria. Priority 2, add 1 non-obvious prediction and 1 divergent case. Priority 3, apply the refined architecture to at least 1 non-companion paper case. So it's giving us a bunch of things. Final recommendation, do not submit this draft anywhere. Well, I could have told you that. This is this is a second draft, basically. It's really a first draft because the other was just nothing but early work. Okay, so we've got a long review from Claude. I'm going to copy that. And here's where the magic happens. I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. I'm going to go back to ChatGPT. I'm going to paste that in. And I'm going to hit enter. And now I'm going to let ChatGPT do its thing. It's the author, remember. So the author just got a number of comments from one of the strictest reviewers on the planets. Now what is it going to do? Oh, here it's coming back already. This is a good review. It's much better than the old broad looks good kind of feedback because it found the real weak points. what Claude is right about. Mapping table is mostly asserted, that's correct. Refined vocabulary is mostly decorative, I think that's correct too. Trim and coherence check is too neat to carry much weight. Where Claude is too harsh, so chat doesn't necessarily agree with everything. It says reject but interesting. That is fair for this draft as a paper, but not because the project is weak. So already, the author got his first level of feedback and says we're still on track, basically. The project still looks okay. See what else it has to say. What I would do specifically, I would make the next file. See, it's already proposing that we make another draft. Version 0.2 of the article. Okay, guess what I'm going to do? Imagine, can you guess what I'm going to type in next? Proceed. Now chat is going to produce a third draft. And we're going to feed that back into Claude. And then we're going to get chat to produce a fourth draft. And we're going to feed back that into Claude. Feed that back into Claude. And in the end here, if all goes well, we're going to have a paper that's submission ready for a journal. I'll let that sit for a while chat does its analyzing and creates the next draft. Again, I'll fast forward through this if it's too long. Dum 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 dum. Okay. All right, ChatGPT is back. That only took about 60 seconds. That's not too bad. So let's download the document. Save that. We'll hop back over to Explorer. And we should get a version 3 popping up here. Yeah, a version 2. So this is the second draft we've done today. Oh, here's what we're going to do. We're going to drag that over to Claude. Here it is in Claude. We're going to just hit submit again. And let Claude review it one more time. Here's the full review of version 0.2. Bottom line verdict, major revision, upgraded from reject but interesting. VO2 closes 3 of the 5 priority gaps in the VO1 review. The 3 workload, structural assignments, etc., etc. So chat has made some significant changes here. Notice we didn't look at them. I want to go look at them right now. While this review is going on here, let's go back over and take a look and see what it did. So this is version 02 of the draft. What are we at now? We're at 8 pages. Table of contents is expanded a little bit. Scope, aim, and discipline, minimal architectural for the mapping. I'm just going to page through it and see if it looks good. Then we're back to the big table again. No, I'm not even gonna read it. I'm gonna hop back to Claude. See if Cloud is done with its review yet. Cloud is still going. Smallish revision set that would most improve it. Priority 1. Add a 250 word self-contained architecture introduction. Yeah, I mean, that's, worthwhile. I mean, there's nothing in here about PVPP itself yet. It's just talking about it as an existing framework. And, a reader's going to go, what is PVPP? Closing paragraphs. Okay, let the paper still stand. Okay, let's take this, copy this to the clipboard. Go back to chat. Paste that in. And we're going to let GPT, whichever it is. I always get that wrong. ChatGPT. We're going to let it think about it. It thought for a few seconds. It's already back. This is a good review. Paper now is in a real revision cycle, not a rescue cycle. What the review got right. What I would do next? Guess what? It suggests it makes a version 03 and keep the revision narrow. So it's going to say, let me create a new doc based upon the review. Bottom line, this is now a major revision paper with a clear path. What that means is ChatGPT, the author, sees that we're going to get to endgame here and have a paper for submission. If you want, I'll build version 03 right now, and I'm sure you're going to guess what I'm going to type next. Proceed. Okay, and now we're back. That took approximately 6 minutes. That was the longest revision so far. Now think about that though. Getting comments from a reviewer, incorporating those comments, and reproducing a new draft. If you're a technical writer out there, you know that takes weeks. That's usually a week or two at least. In a technical document like this, the guidelines we used to use when I worked at a big company a long time ago was 1.5 new pages of material a day, 3 changed pages a day of productivity. We just did this whole draft in 6 minutes. So let's download it. Save it. And now we're looking at version 0.3, which we are going to, you guessed it, drag into Claude. And hit enter for another review. On the normal technical writing process, when you set a paper out for review, you give people a week, sometimes 2 weeks to process read it, come up with comments, bring the comments back to you. We're getting comments back now in a minute or two. And they're good comments. That's the key here. They're, strong comments. This paper is making lots of progress fast. One of the things I learned as a technical writer is once you give someone a book or a piece of paper to review, everybody thinks they're a writer. Bottom line verdict, minor revision. The paper is now arguable at a philosophy of psychiatry or theoretical psychology venue. So it says we have something. That's basically what that says. What was fixed? Architecture introduction, bipolar substrate derivation. Remaining issues. ADHD is the most vulnerable unargued row, and its classification is contestable. Okay, that's fair. Why, I don't know, but I'd have to read it and see. Architecture test updated, relabeling test updated, final recommendation. Here, look at what this says. Submit after 4 fixes. That tells us we're getting close. Closing paragraphs. Okay, now, here we go again. Copy. Paste. Enter. This is a good review. The paper is now close. Claude is basically saying paper is now arguable and venue fit. The remaining problems are sentence level or row level. The only real live exposure is the ADHD conclusion. So what matters now? ADHDA now is the weak row. You have 2 options: derive it briefly and honestly, or remove it from the table for now. Well, that's interesting. It's given us a choice. Do we want to do the hard pass or the easy pass? It recommends keeping it, but add a short derivation. This is stronger than backing away. I agree with that. My recommendation, do one more small pass. Build version 04. Add a brief ADHD derivation with contestability language. Let's do that. Let's go ahead. Proceed. And we'll let it do its work one more time. Now while this is running, I'm going to pop over and have you look at what's going on here with the draft iterations. So we started with this rough draft that we had to begin with. We did version 01 at 343, version 02 at 355, version 03 at 407. That's what I call productivity. And it's already done with the building the doc. Let's download it. Let's get it over to Claude again. And let's let Claude review this. Bottom line verdict: one editorial error requires fixing before submission. 2 small improvements are recommended. Pretty sweet. ADHD contestability acknowledged and argued, priority 1. So it looks like it fixed that. This is the right balance. It makes structural arguments while not pretending the classification is settled. So chat looks like it did a pretty good job on that. Okay, we're going to do this again. Copy. Paste. Enter. Thought for 5 seconds. Analyzing. Look at this. It didn't even come back with comments. Instead it just built the next doc. Okay, we are now at version 05. So we've done 5 revisions so far. Let's go back to Claude. See if Claude's happy with it now. Okay, let's see. Bottom line verdict, minor revision. 1 formatting error remains, then submit. That's pretty tight. What we fixed, confirmation. Oh, where to go? Final recommendation, open the Word document, fix section 7.5 body formatting. That's all it says. Fix the formatting. let's bring it back over. See if ChatGPT wants to do another draft. Here it says preparing submission draft. Check formatting. Thought for 17 seconds. Gives us a new draft, fix the formatting issue, and rolled it into a submission clean file. Download. Take a look and see what it produced here. All right, it produced. It's calling it submission draft version 1.0, so it thinks it's done. I'm going to let Claude look at it one last time. Claude likes it, ready to submit. It's giving us a submission checklist. Companion paper references. Final recommendation. Make 3 editorial adjustments above. Okay, that's fine. Just going to do some, recommend some small stuff here. And that's it. So, let's go take a look and see what we got here. Back to Explorer. Let's open that up. Okay. We now have version 1.0. PVPP decision framework, structural psychiatric phenotypes, and treatment modality coherence. That's a long way from the original draft I had. This paper argues that a stabilized PVPP architecture supports a bounded structural vocabulary for psychiatric phenotypes that is partly coherent with mainstream treatment logic. That's a fancy way of saying we're predicting the treatment and we're comparing the treatment to what the industry says, and we're finding that we have correlation. Unit of mapping, discipline, structural phenotypes, refined vocabulary, schizophrenia, generalized anxiety disorder, bipolar. There's our table again. Treatment modality. Non-obvious structural prediction. Why this is not circular. Conclusion. The old disorder mapping draft contained one durable idea. Psychiatric already acts as if its instability locus matters. The present rewrite preserves that insight but puts it in a more honest footing. The claim is no longer that PVPP reclassifies psychiatry or exhibits numerically impressive fit with DSM treatment patterns. The claim is that PVPP offers a coarse but useful structural phenotype vocabulary, regulatory dominant, substrate dominant, and coupled, that can be refined by stronger architectural work already done in the depression and addiction papers. Now, what that's saying is that our model is looked at these afflictions and is recommending that there's treatment in one of two areas or both. Uh, to jump to human beings right now, rather than saying substrate and layer two, it's saying some of these require medication, some of these require cognitive therapy, things like that, and a third category requires both. That's essentially what the paper says. And it goes out and looks at each individual one. Here's PTSD is coupled. Bipolar is substrate dominant. That means medication. And a few others. Okay, so let's go back. Now we're done basically. Okay, we've iterated from a very very rough draft to a submissible article in an hour or less. Now, am I going to submit this? No, of course not. I haven't read it yet. But just imagine how far we've advanced this paper from a very, very rough draft of a set of ideas to something that's close and tight and knit together. Now, I do want to ask Chat some questions about the result, though. So let's ask Chat a couple of questions. In layman's terms, what is the major finding of the paper? Oh, that's causing some thinking. I didn't think that would take so long. That's burning some GPUs back in some data center somewhere. In 12 seconds, it came back. In plain English, the paper's main finding is mental health problems are not all the same kind of breakdown. Yeah, no surprise there. Some are mainly problems of how the person is reading and responding to reality. It's kind of the brain stuff, that's the substrate level. Some are mainly problems of a person's underlying state or functioning as self. That's more the cognitive level, what we've learned through interactions, experiences, and things like that. Some are both at once. The paper argues that this simple three-way distinction helps explain why treatment in psychiatry already tends to split the way it does. Some treated with medication, some with therapy, some both. The big claim is not we discovered psychiatry is wrong. It is psychiatry already behaves as if different disorders break down in different places. And this paper gives a cleaner structural language for saying where the breakdown is happening. Basically, what this is saying is our model, the PVPP behavior model, is predicting what the medical community already knows. Now, that's strong. Think about that for a second. The medical community, when you go out and you look at the definition of an affliction, it doesn't say this is the cause. Typically not. What it does is it lists symptoms and said if you have these symptoms, you have this problem. What we're doing is we're coming at it from the bottom up saying, here, we think this is going on in the brain and in the cognitive reality that's generated through interactions with people over time. And between the two of those, we're getting, a result that is consistent with what the DSM criteria is and how medical community already classifies these illnesses. So let's ask one more thing here. Is there a high degree of correlation between what the PVP model predicts and what the medical community already understands with respect to individual mental illnesses? thinking. Took 17 seconds. Yes, but only in a coarse qualitative sense, not in a rigorous statistical one. No, we didn't expect that. The strongest honest version is the PVPP model's top level structural categories line up pretty well with how psychiatry already tends to treat major disorder families. That's what I was trying to get at right there. We're predicting how to treat a lot of these things. You treat them with meds or you treat them with therapy. One of the two things. Okay, so but that's related to the framework itself, not related to what this video is about. This video is about the process of authoring and getting review and authoring and getting review. And I hope at this point, if you've stuck with us, you can see that we went from an idea, a good idea, a strong idea with documentation, to a paper that I could submit to a journal right now. Now I'm going to read it and I'm going to put my own comments into it and probably rewrite parts of it myself, so we're not done yet. But this advanced this thing from 10% finished to 90% finished in the base of an hour. I think that's pretty impressive. This is how I use AI in research and development. Today we did a paper and revised it, but I do this with ideas. I discuss ideas with AI. Like I said earlier, I'll talk for up to 10 minutes about a subject, and it'll come back with pages of response. And I'll read them, and I'll go back in with another 5 minutes of discussion. And in the end, we come out with really interesting ideas that can be written down and hopefully can further some of academia within certain categories. So anyway, Lance here. I'm glad you stuck with me. Thanks for watching. Check out any of the other videos on the PVPP model and on how I do research and development with AI.